The deductions has ceased, the charges have not, creating a lot of discomfort for consumers. Well, tonight on Business Focus, we met with the Chief Executive Officer of the Chamber of Telecommunications companies to have a wider conversation about the telecoms industry. Take a listen. Hello, good evening, and welcome to your most authoritative business and economic analysis program live here on TV3. This is Business Focus. My name is Parkus Yasari. Now, over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of back and forth ever since government announced the increase in the communication service tax from 6 to 9%. A lot of issues about the implementation of this particular policy. We know that the Telecoms Chamber has recently issued a statement on the roadmap to the implementation of this communication service tax. I've been joined in the studio by the Chief Executive Officer of the Telecoms Chamber, Mr. Ken Ashigbey. Mr. Ashigbey, thank you very much for your time and good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Marcus.
All right. So to begin with, you've been here for 2 years. Today is your second anniversary. How has it been like for you?
Well, it's been interesting, moving from an industry from graphic where you had in excess of 700 staff, team members that you were working with, to an industry which is very, less than 10 people working. But then the difference is that in graphic, when you do your stakeholder map, you're looking at just a few stakeholders. But here, you come and your stakeholder map is in excess of 18. And so
and of course, you're having to work with multinational companies.
Well, yes, so so you have your members that you have to deal with as well. So the challenges are different and very interesting. And for me, I think that's what makes it interesting to come here. There's no boring day within the telecommunications sector. Things are changing at a very fast pace, and you need to ensure that you are at the cuff of that, and you are able to help your members, help the industry, help Ghana as a whole be able to embrace, the change that telecommunication and the whole digital revolution brings to bear. And I think it's been 2 years. There's quite a lot that we've done within these 2 years.
You've had quite an expansive career, which spans mostly across the media landscape. You work with Joy FM, work with the Graphic Communications Group, as you rightly stated, and now you're in the telecoms industry. Why that shift?
Well, the interesting thing is that I went to school and studied electrical engineering. So I started my work, working with one of the greatest contractors in Ghana, Fanel, and I got my hands dirty, doing actual engineering work, building services, extending electricity and all of that before I, stumbled into multimedia as their chief technology officer, then became general manager of Joy FM, then had to go to OMP and worked with OMP, Metro TV for a while, and then came back to multi-TV again, and then found myself in graphic. And then in graphic, I had to resign at some point, and then took up the role here at the chamber.
You were not pushed out?
No, not at all. Well, I resigned because there were some corporate governance issues. One of my staff was appointed onto the media commission, and I did not think that, if you consider the fact that in one breath he was my boss as, a member of the media commission, and another breath he worked for me as, the director of newspapers, I thought it was wrong. My board agreed with me, and we wrote to the NMC, but the NMC said the appointment was made by another person. And I thought that in life it's important that you take some principled decisions.
So it's purely based on principle?
Yes, and that's what I stated in my resignation letter to the NMC, that I was leaving really based on principle, because I thought there were conflicts of interest issues that could arise, and I didn't want that to happen. So I left, and fortunately then Kweku Sechiado had also joined the NCA as board chairperson, so could not, keep on the role, and so then I applied, and the members of the chamber found me.
You applied, or it was handed over to you?
Well, I applied. At some point I was told, when I expressed interest, I was asked to send in my CV. So I'm pretty sure they did a headhunt, and so then I went through an interview. I remember the interview quite well, and I was then appointed as chief executive of the chamber.
The Telecoms Chamber, like you rightly said, which was first handled by Kweku Sechiado, a man you've worked with for many years now. Yes. You had to fill in his shoes. That chamber over the years has fought a number of battles with government,
Oh, well.
Is it an area you find convenient dealing with?
Well, I'm not too sure we would say fought a lot of battles, because if you look at it, there are a lot of things we've done also with government. If you look at the issues of mobile money, if you look at the issues of even interoperability that happened quite currently, if you look at what we're doing currently with fiber cuts, being able to deal with the issues of fiber cut, if you look at the issues of even the tower moratorium that we had to deal with as an industry, currently we're working with the regulator on the issues of the guidelines, on these towers. We're engaging government on this ECOWAS roaming. So there's a lot of things that we do together. As an industry organization, we focus on a lot more of advocacy. We work on how to help shape policy, help look at regulations. And so I would say that there's been a lot more work that we have done with government than fight. And I think that for my predecessor, up to this particular point, that's how it has been. And, as we speak now, we're working with the NCA on this fiber cut issue. We've been working with the Bank of Ghana. We've been working with GIPS. We're currently even working with the Office of the Vice President on digitizing the subsidy payment, so that, we are able to improve, the country is able to improve how subsidies are managed. It makes it a bit more efficient. So there are a lot of things that we do with both government at the policy level and then at the stake, at the regulatory level. If you look at the work we've done with the EPA, for example, on the STAR guidelines, a lot of cordial work gets done and a lot of brain power gets, exercised. But definitely in all of these engagements, as different stakeholders, you find out that there might be some differences that would come up, but, most of the time what you find we do is that there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of negotiations, there's a lot of give and take to be able to arrive at positions that are, the best interest of the country, that are in the best interest of the industry, are in the best interest of our consumers. And that's been the focus of the Chamber.
So tell me, how does the Chamber operate?
So the Chamber operates, it's a member organization made up of all the telcos. So currently we have 6 members, because there's been some mergers and some of people like Espresso still have left. So you have the MTN, Vodafone, Airtel Tigo. Then you have American Towers, Glow. You have Eaton, and then you have Helios Towers. Glow is not a member of the Chamber yet.
Why is that so?
Well, because you see, it's a member organization. It's not mandatory for various organizations. But there are other organizations that we're talking to, because as a Chamber itself, we look at the fact that the telecommunication industry is expanding. So there are conversations with other facets of the whole ecosystem to also join the Chamber, so that we are able to do a lot more of this advocacy and to be able to help improve the ecosystem as a whole and be able to improve Ghana. Because for me, I think that the digital gap is definitely a developmental gap, and it offers an opportunity for the country to be able to leapfrog this whole gap that we have. And if we are going to be able to achieve government's Ghana Beyond Aid agenda, one of the places where we have comparative and competitive advantage is in the telecommunications sector, and working with our members and then working with policymakers and working with regulators, we believe that we will be able to drive that change.
So you're just talking about how the Chamber operates. So you've got this number of members on the Chamber. When an issue comes up, what happens?
Apart from the members of the Chamber, you have the executive committee of the Chamber, you have the secretariat, and then you have the board made up of all the members who sits on the board. Then you also then have working groups that would take on, so an issue of taxation, for example. What would happen is that there's a taxation working group that would take up this issue, and then they would discuss it. So we would come to a consensus. At the Chamber level, it has to be consensus. So we agree a particular position. And then the Secretariat, working with the Chief Executive, then would canvass that. So we do that because we don't want to run a big organization. So we use our members. So there's the tax, there's financial working group, there's a technical and technology working group, there's a regulatory working group, there's also the marketing and communication working groups, and they take particular issues and then they advocate for them. And then most of our engagement that we do, because it's a very small secretariat as well, you find out that when we go with our members, and it has to be all our members equally represented to be able to deal with issues.
Let's talk about the challenges, the major challenges that confront the telecoms industry today.
Generally, the telecommunication industry suffers this perception of the cash cow mentality, and so there's the tendency to constantly overtax the telecommunication industry. So, and this is a global phenomenon, and so you find out that in a lot more of where you get the telecommunication industry doing what it ought to do. And for me, I see the telecommunication industry rather as that workhorse that needs to be fed so that it will drag along other industries for development. So if you take typically for us in Ghana, when you put all the taxes and the levies that we pay, we're doing about 44%. Which definitely, it's like we tax the industry.
You mean it accounts for 44% of government revenue?
No, the telecommunication industry about 10%.
Right.
But in terms of, the taxes that is on the industry, if you take all the various from the VAT cumulatively, that's it. And that's like taxing the sin industries. But this is an industry that should rather propel the country. So,
but that's because you said that a lot of people believe the telecoms industry is a cash cow.
Yes, and that perception really is counter working against the industry. That's why I see it as a challenge, and that's why for us as an industry, we want to engage a lot more with government, engage a lot more with other stakeholders to see how do we rather use the telecommunication industry to generate a lot more revenue. Government had been preaching the production rather than taxation. So we need to rather push a lot more of that, so that a typical example, and there's a paper that we've submitted to the Ministry of Finance ahead of the budget reading, looking at how do we digitize all people to government payment. Because we believe that if we did that, you would be able to expand the tax net, you'd be able to get a lot more people paying taxes, you would bring a lot more efficiency, cut out the waste,
the chamber wants to lead that process?
Yes, that's a conversation we're having with government.
So that's your major input into the 2020 budget?
It's one of the issues that we raised. Another thing that we raised in the 2020 budget is, there's a sunset clause on the National Stabilization Levy. We're hoping that, for example, government would allow the sun to set on that clause so that we can take that off, because it was for a particular period, but we keep on pushing it. So we're hoping that would go. We're also hoping that the whole issue of taxation needs to be looked at again.
I know you represent the interests of telecom companies, but I'm also sure that being a Ghanaian, you've had over the years arguments by many that the telecoms industry probably accounts for one of the reasons why we have the depreciation of our local currency every year, and that a lot of these companies, because they're multinationals, they make their profits and they repatriate them. How do you respond to that?
You see, it's important to, when these arguments are made, you predicate them on, facts, because as you say that, the other arguments you need to also realize is that apart from the people, apart from, some of the local things you do, all the investment that go into telecommunication is Forex. So you bring Forex in, you invest a lot of Forex in, then you have to earn CDs and pesos and put that together. You don't forget that apart from just our members, there are other Ghanaians who were given licenses to run telecommunication organization. Unfortunately for them, not all of them have been able to succeed. The only reason is that it's a very capital intensive, endeavor. And so there's a lot more Forex that also comes in terms of the capital investment that is put in to be able to ensure that these industries work. As we speak in Ghana, we're not totally covered. So you need to still do expansions of the network, which require a lot of investment, and all of that is coming in Forex. So definitely, when an investment is made, the only way people would be able to invest is if they are also able to repatriate their funds.
I know in the past, certain government officials had, essentially suggested that if it were possible, would have telecom companies retain a certain percentage of their profits in the country. Is that being done at the moment?
Well, you see, the thing about it is the fact that it's a balancing act. You need to run the business. So because a lot of even these telecommunication, if you look at the leadership of the telecommunication industry in Ghana. And virtually most of them are Ghanaian. So in terms of how much even it is that you're paying your people, there's a lot more Ghanaians in there. If you look at all the telecommunication companies, all of them are members.
But that's nowhere compared to the kind of profits they make.
No. So tell me, how do you call it? MTN just published their
financials.
The financials. Tell me, what's the levels of profits? Then how much are they investing? What's the capex that is going into it? So that you do a good balance of it. That's why I gave you a typical example of the local people who also Ghanaians who are giving licenses. The reason why it's not happened is because the industry is so capital intensive that you need to be bringing in a lot more forex in. Now, if you look at what happened last year, for example, typically what happened last year, you are investing in terms of capex that came in 6.2 million. Is a capital expenditure, that investments that had to be done in a year.
So you think we're being overly critical of the telecoms industry?
Well, I'm not too sure. Maybe you are being overly critical, but I'm pretty sure that people see the worth.
You think so?
People see the worth. Look, if you consider
people argue, for instance, as to why none of the telecoms industry, in terms of equity, is not in the hands of local people, and
but
why it's
and that's that you see, and that argument is also not funded unless you're saying that 100%. I just said to you that there were Ghanaians who were given licenses. So when you look at the telecommunication industry, it's a very liberal telecommunication industry. Not too long ago, you remember that the NCA advertised spectrum to be sold.
Right.
It was not limited to only foreigners.
Yeah,
it was made so Ghanaians could have done it. Fortunately for you, you now have even one of the telcos currently being publicly listed and Ghanaians own shares in it.
Right.
Vodafone has government of Ghana shares in it. If you look at Airtel Gold, the way the genesis that came in, so all of that.
So gradually, we're seeing
it's happening. I'm hoping that like if you take a typical example of what happened with MTN, there was not all the shares were acquired. So we hope that a lot more Ghanaians would be able to acquire. If you look at the issues of jobs, the number of jobs that this industry creates, about 1.6 million indirect jobs that are being created, about 6,000 direct jobs that are being created, and the impact is felt generally everywhere that
it's
you
quite
go.
monumental, right?
Quite so, but there's so much that we can do, and you see, so you find out that typically in other jurisdictions now, you're looking into ways in which you can empower the industry to do more. So you take China, for example, with the 5G that is coming up. What has China done? It's taking the top 5, MNOs, and it's giving them spectrum for free, the 5G spectrum for free, so that they can drive that. You go into other markets, they're lowering the cost of spectrum so that, you can
And I'm sure in this sense, you're talking directly to government.
Oh, definitely. That's a conversation we constantly keep on having with government. How can we balance it? Because you see, when you charge $60 million for 4G spectrum, what then it means is that that has to be amortized, and then over the life of that license, the operator has to recoup that. So that it makes it difficult for you to bring the cost of the service to the point where a lot more people will be able to use it. So what we know that definitely government also needs revenue, because you need to consider where we are. And then, so how do you balance that in such a way that you price these spectrum, which is a national asset, in such a way that everybody can afford it, and then be able to generate some revenue out of that, but also be able to make it in such a way that you can have total coverage, you can have the speeds that you want to have, so that a lot more people will be able to use the service. And that's why for us, we're happy working with the NCA, because one of the challenges, apart from the cost, is the issues of damage to fiber cuts, which is very extensive. You have issues of even cell sites that are being invaded. So we're working with the NCA, working with the Ministry of Communication, the cyber security law that is going there, to classify telecommunication infrastructure as critical national infrastructure, so that it would be protected. And all of us as citizens of Ghana would also be able to protect that, so that instead of spending a lot more money, $4.5 million is what was spent last year, in fixing fiber cuts, you can rather use that to expand fiber, so that in my village in Chame, for example, you'll be able to send fiber there, so that the school in Chame can get high-speed internet for the students in there to be as competitive as my son would be in Accra.
Mr. Ashigbey, so One issue that has come up for heated public debate has to do with the communication service tax. We know that government recently, the finance minister had announced an increase from 6 to 9%. The difficulty has been with how this is implemented. You recently came up with a statement, essentially giving a roadmap as to how this is going to be done. So we're all satisfied now.
Yes, I think so. You see, the interesting thing is that when it comes to taxes, TV3, the VAT you collect is not for you. You're an agent of government. It's the same way the telecommunication industry, we are agents of government in collecting the CST. So previously it was 6%. This was a tax that was being absorbed by the industry. But then, because of the difficulty and the challenges that the industry faces, the industry is not able to continue absorbing the tax again. So what the industry decided was to pass on the tax to the consumer, because rightly so, it's a consumer tax. And our reading of the tax and aligning it with the way the GRE wants the tax to be treated and paid, it's about at the point of the purchase that the tax is incident. So we reading that in implementing the law, decided that once you make the purchase, we take the tax off for government, and then the tariff then is you use what is left.
Which was going to be simpler.
Yes, that's quite simpler, and easier to do. And even with that change, it took us up to the 1st of October to be able to implement that. But, there were uproars because I'm sure, the deductions were being done. It was new in the market. And then so there was an engagement, and government called us and said no. So can you pass that through the tariff? And the only thing is that because of the complexities that currently confronts the telecommunication industry, because you are giving people choices, the product is not the same, it's not vanilla anymore, people want to choose a mix. So there are various bundles. So you can decide that you want a lot more data, just a little SMS, a little voice. Somebody can decide I only want to buy data. So there are various, over 200 products for each of their telcos. So what would have to happen now with this particular implementing it through the tariff is that you now need to take over 200 products. The commercial people will have to take it and then apply this. The incident of the 9% comes to 7% on the product. Apply the 7% on the various bundles, the over 200 ones. Once you're finished that, the technology team would then also have to take it and then apply that on the intelligent network. Then when all of that is done, you run all your tests, and make sure that there are no problems again with it. Then you need to come back to the various channels. People buy scratch cards, people buy vouchers, people would use mobile money, people would do transfers. Now the banks are you're able to buy your recharge using your bank account. So you need to now deal with all the various bank accounts. And so that's a lot of work. So in our conversation with the regulator, and he also understanding the work that had to be done, we were initially asking for a 3-month window to be able to do that. But then, with the regulator and the ministry, they said we needed to compress it because this needed to be done. So we had to then commit a lot more resources, both human, both more technology and time, to it to be able to crash that project and do it in 6 weeks. So by the 26th of November, we're expecting that all work on that will be done, so that then we'll be able to transist, and then so that when you buy, say, your 10 CDs again, your 70 pesos will not be taken upfront, but it would rather when you want to buy a bundle. So if you bought 10 CDs...
Essentially, Mr. Ashigbey, the value is the same, isn't it?
Well, so the only thing is that it's now not going to be upfront. It's going to be over the period over which you use it.
But you maintain that, the initial approach, there was nothing illegal about it?
No, there was nothing, definitely. There was nothing illegal about it. The policy direction has been given by the ministry. Now the regulator has taken it up with various stakeholders, and we're discussing that to ensure that, we can do this at optimally, so that the subscribers, the network operators, all are not overburdened, and we still are able to push the frontiers of our digitization. Because one of the things we need to, and most of the time people would want to raise the issue about the fact that you still can acquire a SIM card, with some of these agents and all of that, and there's a tendency to say, why don't you do it in brick and mortar? The jobs that are created in that space are also valuable for this country. So rather what you want to do is that, can you use technology in such a way that even when you're using these agents and all of that, you still would be able to do it. You walk now to Heathrow, right there at Heathrow. It would not be a Vodafone, shop, or, you can still get an agent there where you would be able to buy. But the only thing that would happen is that there's a robust, database that if you are asked for an ID, they will use that to do a validation before you. We need to get there. And I'm sure with the use of technology, with the way the NCA has started this already, bringing all stakeholders together and discussing how to do it, we'll be able to do this. And we as, the chamber, and our members will bring also the knowledge that we have. And there's a lot of Ghanaian, knowledge within these sectors to be able to help all of us put it together.
Elsewhere in other countries, there have been upheavals. People have demonstrated because of attempts by government to tax mobile money. There are hints that that could possibly happen here in Ghana. What are your own thoughts on that?
Well, this is a conversation that we've constantly been having with government. So even the paper that we did, to government, our thoughts and what we have said based on empirical evidence.
What have you said?
Is that rather than tax mobile money, use mobile money to expand the tax net. Because you see, mobile money is just a form of payment. It's just like saying that, the good thing is that this government, when it came into power, took taxes of, financial services. So this is financial services that me and you, we do. You would say are upper class. When it comes to mobile money, it's a democratization. It's ensuring that financial services are available to everybody.
Financial inclusion.
Exactly, you're driving that. You don't want to put, a tax on that. Already, government also has a huge digitization strategy, and it would need financial inclusion to drive that. So for government who wants to achieve this digital inclusion and would want to ensure that there are about 7 million Ghanaians that are not within the financial sector, you are bringing them in there. Taxing mobile money would definitely not be the way.
So the Telecoms Chamber's position on that matter
is don't tax mobile money.
Right.
Don't tax mobile money. Because, you see, by the point we need to bear in mind that mobile money already pays some taxes. There are withholding taxes that are paid based on our agents who even make money out of it. There is, when profits are made by the operators, they also pay their taxes. But the mode of paying it, the transactions that people do, don't tax that. Some of the things that we need to do is we need to improve on the whole mobile money architecture so that we can separate the payments from the transfers, so that government then can have a lot more visibility to say who are being paid. Because, see, the interesting thing is that Ghana, we have, people would want to call it the informal sector, but you see, by the structure of our economy, that is also formal sector. The only thing we need to do is to formalize that kind of informal sector we have, so that there's a lot more visibility for the Minister for Finance. There's a lot more visibility for the Commissioner General of GRA, so that he knows the person who comes to solve this for me. When I am paying the person with mobile money, it should be a payment mode, so that when the person has to account for his taxes, it's clear. And if a lot of us can see that my neighbor is also paying the taxes, a lot more people will be willing to pay the taxes. We'll be able to increase how much cash comes in. We'll be able to achieve the Ghana Beyond Aid agenda, but we'll be able to lower the incidence of taxes. And you see, the more you lower the incidence of taxes, the more people would want to pay taxes. And then, we'll be able to then develop our country without depending on people to bring in us money and then be able to start telling us how we ought to do our things. Like typically, like what is happening, with PDS. If it was not for the fact that Americans were bringing us money, we would be able to do it at our pace. And I'm happy the Minister of Finance is saying that now that the money is not in there, we'll sit there and do it rather as the way we do it as Ghanaians. And for me, I think that those are the things that technology can help us to do so that we can be our own persons.
Right. Finally, Mr. Ashigbey, what would you say is the future of the telecoms industry?
Well, I think the future of the telecom industry is very, very bright. There are new things that are coming there. The whole digital transformation that is coming, 5G is coming, the issue of artificial intelligence is coming, big data, all of that, it's coming. So we need to really empower our people with this. We need to ensure that a lot more people would be covered. We need to ensure that the whole country, would be able to get 4G, 5G everywhere. So we need to take all the bottlenecks that we currently have in terms of the multiple places where you need to get authorization, the challenges with you know, the high incidence of taxation on the industry. You know, we need to take all of this, but we, more importantly as well, we need to start producing our own content so that instead of constantly, you know, when people complain about the fact that data is more expensive in Ghana than America, when somebody is in America and he wants to watch Netflix, they don't leave Ghana, you know, they don't leave America to be able to do that. But for us, most of our content is out. So we need to also empower Ghanaians so that we can develop our own content, ensure that we host our own things here so that when we have to do some of these things, the conversation is still amongst us. We use it. Then people can also come and take content from our place.